We do have a jingle. It goes like that.
Yeah, nailed it.
That's a long jingle.
Well, it's kind of, I mean, there's talking over it. Hello, you're listening to Science. Anyway, it's fine.
I see.
Thanks for listening to an episode of the show before coming on, Tony. Appreciate it.
From ScienceSortOf.com, you're listening to Science Sort of.
Hello and welcome to Science Sort of. This is episode 341. I am your host, Ryan Haupt, and joining me to talk about things that are science, things that are sort of science, and things that wish they were science. Our theme this time is Highway to the Science Zone. I'm not going to sing the song yet. It'll probably come up naturally at some point. But joining me to talk about those things is Batman.
Hello.
Or AKA Joe Batwinnis. Sorry for revealing your secret identity. You shouldn't have typed that into your text box as your identifier in this recording session, but you did, so now we all know.
It's all right. I'll just put on my glasses and then nobody will know.
That's a different character.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Same universe.
Send your penguins to attack at any time. Be forewarned, he lives in a desert. Also joining us is Antonio Tony Munoz. I guess Dr. Antonio Tony Munoz, PhD.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
How you doing, Tony?
I'm okay.
I almost wanted to call this episode Highway to the Tony Zone, but I thought that was a little it's a little much. So I pulled back on that. I pulled back on that. I buzzed the tower on that idea and instead just let the theme stand on its own. But we are so excited to have you, Tony. Thanks for joining us.
Like I said, happy to be here.
Little bit of background on you. You went to North Carolina State University for undergrad, where you got degrees in biochemistry and chemistry, and your PhD is in molecular biophysics from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. Remember, everyone, the Johns is also plural, which is weird. And now you work in consulting, but I realized that in all the years we've been friends, so Tony, you and I are kind of like, we have that friendship where our wives are good friends, and then you and I started hanging out, and it's like, oh, I also really like Tony, so I'm really glad our wives are friends. This has worked out nicely.
Yep, 100%.
And we've talked about that metatextual aspect of our relationship, but I realized that, you know, you had your PhD, even though we're about the same age, you had your PhD like before I even met you. So, or at least you were nearly done with it. Your CV still has your PhD as expected in 2014. I hope that worked out for you. But
I thought I fixed that.
Nope, not the one I got. But I realized that you and I had never really sat down and hashed it out on your science. And so I was really excited to talk about some of the topics that you and I usually talk about, which we're going to do in the second half of the show, and as a big part of the reason Joe is here. But I wanted to learn more about the science that you did before you got into consulting. So I guess a lot of times when we're doing the show, I'll ask scientists who are still working as scientists what kind of scientists you identify as. And I guess for you, now that you're working in sort of a different industry, I would ask, do you still tell people you're a scientist, or how does that work when you've kind of left academia to go do some other kind of job? Or what's sort of your perspective on that?
That's a great question, actually. So I don't necessarily tell people I'm a scientist. I think I'm science adjacent at this point. Using many of the skills I learned throughout my graduate career and the research I had done previous to that in undergraduate. But more or less, right, I've left my realm of knowledge, as it were, right? The thing I concentrated the most on, the basic biochemistry, the kinetics equations, some of the maths that I was using to do imaging and other things like that, right? And what I did use and what I continue to use are the problem solving skills. And that's where I generally focus on when I'm in a business context, right? Mm-hmm. Because as a consultant, that's all they really care about is, can you solve problems? And I think a good corollary to that is kind of the argument I had to make at the time when I first was looking for jobs, is because leaving academia to try to go into consulting was a little tough back then. I think it's better now. But what I had researched, what I'd read at the time, was people like McKinsey, people like BCG, some of these big name consulting firms, they had started hiring 20, 30% of their workforce straight out of JDs, MDs, and PhD programs. And when they were asked that question, why are you hiring so many of these postgraduate degrees that aren't MBA students anymore? The answer was because it's easier to teach someone with that kind of advanced degree how to do business than it is to teach an MBA how to solve problems.
Interesting.
And I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
So, and we can talk through the story later, but let's do more to your direct point. Let's talk about the science for a second, if I can remember it back to 2014, right? That's now 7 years ago. I have prepped a little bit here to reread it. But actually,
how fresh was it, like reading your own work from back then? Were you?
There was a one moment of surprise. It was like, I completely forgot about that paper. Because doing a PhD, at least for me, was a pretty standard 3 papers ish, and you're done.
But I guess we should explain that a little bit for folks who haven't been through a PhD. Typically, a American dissertation has 3 chapters, 5 chapters if you include the introduction and the conclusion. But those are relatively short chapters that just sort of introduce and then summarize the 3 internal chapters. And each of those chapters in a modern American PhD, this is a thing that has evolved into what it is now and is continuing to evolve. Each of those chapters tend to be standalone manuscripts or papers that could each on their own be submitted to journals. And if historically, your PhD dissertation was sort of supposed to be like a single cohesive document that everything tied together. It has become a little bit more disjointed, to the dismay of some, but it is, I think, as a document, it is more practically applicable to the future career of the PhD student to have each unit chapter be publishable. So what you're saying is your dissertation met that same sort of criteria where you had 3 different chapters, and those chapters was the thing you could publish.
Yeah, can publish or did already publish.
Right. Yeah. No, you've got an impressive record of publication for somebody who then left academia. Like, you've got the publication record of somebody who could have theoretically continued on in academia if that was what you wanted to do, which is a whole other can of worms about the pitfalls of working in academia.
Yep, that's a whole nother podcast I could do. Part of what I did in graduate school as well, I worked with the Graduate Student Association. I worked with people in science communication, worked with postdocs who were working on internships on the Hill, trying to do more advocacy, things like that. But it always came back down to science communication, publishing, that whole world. And to be quite honest, it was a little frustrating at the time, and is part of the reason why I did leave.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I appreciated the overview of how a PhD works, because frankly, I've never really looked into it. I'm not really familiar with how it works.
Actually, at this point, I only advocate for people that are very serious about doing long-term research, translational research, more likely to even consider going there.
And I've actually given people similar advice. I had a friend of mine ask me for some just sort of my insight on the culture of a department that I've been a part of. I won't go into any more detail than that. And basically just said, he said, and he's, our age, and he was like, because I'm considering going back to school for a PhD. And he's got, a wife and stepkids and like a life to deal with. And I was just like, man, I got to be honest, like it's not worth it. From a career standpoint, is it intellectually stimulating? Yes, but like the toll that it takes is significant. And so you really got to commit and be ready to commit for a long time for not much payout. So I do also, Tony, kind of tell people to unless there's no other alternative to what you want to do with your life, it's probably not worth it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think there's people that should pursue that and will continue to do so, and academia will hopefully even continue to get better, in which case that would encourage more people to go and have the right kind of tools to.
And we also produce so many more PhDs than we have jobs for people with PhDs. So like, there's also,
there's an element of that too, of course.
Yeah, if we're talking about it from a capitalist framework, which I don't think is any of our favorite frameworks, there's just the supply is overwhelming the demand, and that's part of the reason we end up with people who've been in school for 10 years not making a great salary as an adjunct or whatever. So
right. Well, at the end of the day, right, people who go into a PhD program tend to be inquisitive, tend to be curious, tend to want to be lifetime learners. And if you do that, right, then you end up being one of those people that just doesn't retire, which further fuels the problem.
Yes, because there's not new jobs aren't opening up. But I want to go, instead of talking about the eventual downfall of American academia in the future, I want to talk about the past a little bit, because Tony, you have like a really interesting international story that ends up with you mostly growing up in North Carolina and then going to North Carolina State University. So to whatever degree you would like, can you talk to us about how you ended up at a state school in this state where you grew up that was distinct from your international background, and what made you want to pursue biochemistry and chemistry once you got there?
Sure. So let's do the elevator pitch, right? So Tony, born in Germany to American parents. actually in Germany, not on base. Both parents worked on base. Only lived there a brief period of time. Then the wall came down, and our family decided that for economic reasons and familial reasons, we're going to come back to the U.S. Came back to the
Hadrian's
U.S.
Wall?
Yeah, that one. And
Sorry.
moved to Maryland. Actually moved in with my grandmother, who lived in the area, worked at Johns Hopkins, oddly enough, as a nurse, as an RN, doing a number of different things. She later worked for Navy and the Red Cross. But after we lived there for a short period of time, my father got a job in North Carolina. We moved down. I grew up there. Great place to grow up at the time. Wonderful education system. Not so much the case today, but that's where I grew up and had a wonderful time. Went to what is considered, I think, like a magnet school or something in middle school, which was great fun. Did a trip in 7th grade to the Florida Keys for a week as kind of a sea camp. And that was the I'm going to be a marine biologist moment, right? And I think a lot of kids go through either a dinosaur phase. I'd already gone through my dinosaur phase at that point, living in Maryland, going to the Smithsonian 10,000 times. Loved the fossil hall, hated it when it closed, and love that it's back open again. Thank you, Julie, for everything that you do.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Julie. My dinosaur phase was like kindergarten.
I still have dinosaurs on my desk. So never really left the dinosaur phase. And
I never left the Julie phase.
Well, that's good. So after 7th grade, doing the science thing a little bit with the sea camp and whatnot, I also had grown up, watching Bill Nye the Science Guy, as a lot of people in the 90s did, right? Bill Nye the Science Guy was my idol. I wanted to be him. I wanted to do that, do science on TV, teach people stuff, right? Went to high school, excelled in math and science, took some AP classes, did okay in them. But more or less, right, my family was very middle income, right? So when I got the opportunity to apply for colleges, mostly state schools considered, lucky enough to get basically a full ride to NC State. And that is part of the reason I went there. The other reason was I applied to UNC Chapel Hill. And when I toured it, they had way too much construction. And I said, this is insane. I'm going to have to walk through a construction zone every day. I don't want to live here. Fast forward 6 months, show up at NC State, they tore up Hillsborough Street. So,
oh yeah. I mean, that's
jokes on me.
I think that's a joke on every student getting ready to enter university. I guess I know we have high school student listeners. Be forewarned. Some of your tuition is going to fund the facilities that will be enjoyed by future students, not yourself. The joke when I was at UC Santa Cruz was that the UC stood for under construction.
Yeah, when I got to Ohio State.
Ohio
State is perfectly acceptable.
The one with the marching
Ohio
band?
State University.
I heard it's the Ohio State University.
It is the Ohio State University. But
the
you're allowed to
OSU.
say Ohio State. No,
I refuse.
Oh God, what are you doing?
I had Skyline the other day. It was very good. It was from Columbus. My mom brought it back.
Wow, nice. Anyway, I got 1 year out of a student union, and then they tore it down between my freshman and sophomore year, and there was no student union for the rest of my time there.
Oops.
Well, I had a wonderful time at NC State, though, all things considered. Started out as a chemistry major and decided a little ways into that I really was more interested in biochemistry and things that had more an organic relativity to them. There was some talk about being pre-med. I should note at the time, my great aunt was a professor at University of Rochester in the microbiology department. She actually headed the microbiology department there. And she was later a professor emeritus. She had encouraged me while I was in undergrad to pursue an MD PhD as my next step, thinking that that's where the real money lay. And
it's funny because you and I have never talked about this, but that was something I was encouraged to do too.
And it kind of made sense, right? If you wanted an MD to pay paid for, then that's a great way to do that. She ran a lab that was fairly successful and had a number of MD PhDs that had run through her lab.
And an MD PhD, for folks who don't know, is a program where you get both a medical doctorate and doctorate of philosophy in the same program. And it's usually like a 5-year program, I think.
It's a shortened timeline versus doing both separately. Yes.
Yeah. So it's geared more towards people who want to do biomedical research or work at a research hospital where they might be providing some patient care, but they're also spending time doing research. So the programs I looked into, the one I looked at the most closely because I was already in the UC system was the UCSF one. They're really cool, but they're intense. You got to be a special kind of.
I was gonna say that sounds very intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Tony, you mentioned you mentioned dinosaurs, but then you started off as chemistry, then you kind of shifted back to biochemistry. A failing of our show, I'll just say that it's a failing, is that we tend to avoid subjects like biochemistry just because we've had co-hosts who were chemists, we've had co-hosts who were biologists, but we've never really had somebody who worked at that intersection. The chemist we had was a physical chemist.
Yep.
And so we tend to avoid certain kinds of topics just because they seem more complex than our generalized expertise allows us to speak to. So can you tell us, just like in your own words, a good operational definition of biochemistry as you learned it when you were an undergrad?
Ooh, that's tough. I can give it a shot. Sure. Of course.
Sure.
So in my humble opinion, thinking back 10 years plus now, right? Biochemistry is the study of really biology and biological processes, though at a smaller scale and using more intense methods of mathematics, if that makes any sense, right? So it's not what he just described a minute ago, physical chemistry or organic chemistry, things where you're just talking about an individual chemical reaction. You are talking about biological processes, but generally speaking, on a cellular level or intracellular level. So something very, very small, an individual interaction between two proteins, for example.
Okay.
Right? Is that good enough?
Yeah, no, that's a great definition. So when you were an undergrad, did you get the chance to do any research or assist with any research or work in a lab? Or like, at what point did you decide that you were going to pursue the PhD path?
Yeah. So good T-ball exercise there. All right. Thanks for the layup. So
been doing this for 12 years.
If I can mix my sports analogies there.
We're definitely we're big into the sports ball on this show, but just explain your sports terms as you use them so our listeners can keep up, please. But other than that, I think we're good to go.
Not for us. We all know.
I think T-ball is where a lot of our listeners probably ended their sports careers.
Right. So I think the layup one was basketball. So it was T-ball and then layup. So in undergraduate, doing the chemistry degree, decided I didn't like the chemistry so much, wanted to do some more things that related to the body and those types of things. So got into the biochemistry, realized at the time, and this is where I just really lucked out. You mentioned I had the 2 degrees. I had already completed all of the requirements for the chemistry degree by the time I switched over and started doing the biochemistry. So
yeah, the same thing happened to me.
It wasn't really like I did 2 full degrees, right? It was like I happened to have a lot of credits and that's just how it worked out. But to your point, I also have a minor in genetics from that time. It helps when you have taken enough AP classes to count as a sophomore when you start. The undergraduate life did lead me into a undergraduate research position. Started off as a summer position, summer of my sophomore year. I think probably through a lady, got the word of a lab looking for some help and started working in this lab. Don't even remember the lady's name anymore, to be quite honest. But met Dr. Paul Agris, who ran a biochemistry lab at NC State. And he had at the time, postdoc named Frank Vendy, who was doing molecular biology, biochemistry, computer dynamic simulations, which at the time for me, right, this was back in the days of Halo and the original Call of Duties. And I was a big video game nerd, pretty decent computer nerd. I no longer program, but at the time that sounded cool. And so it was looking at these ribonucleic acids, RNA, and seeing how do they interact on a computer over a period of time, right? So it was modeling out movement of 2 different molecules in a water solvent with some salt. And this was my first foray into an RNA world and learning that. And so as
a paleontologist, my first foray into RNA world came about 3.4 billion years ago. So try to keep up.
Yep. That's fair. So did the research, put together a couple of posters, went to neighboring universities, presented those. That was a bunch of fun, and said, yeah, no, this is something I want to do. Now, it's also worth noting that in 2008, there might have been a little something that happened in the financial world. I can't exactly remember what it was, but a lot of people decided, I want to go to graduate school. I don't want to enter the job market.
No, dude. I mean, we've actually, again, you and I, and on the podcast, we've never really talked about this. I don't think we have. I know you and I haven't, Tony. I don't think I've ever talked about this on the podcast, but like a huge part of me going to grad school was because I was getting ready to graduate in 2008, and then the housing market crashed, and the grad schools I applied to, the one that I got into, the professor that I had applied to work with literally called me on the phone. Like, this wasn't a letter from the department chair or anything like that. He called me on the phone and said, I wanted to accept you. We have no money. I'm really sorry. It's not going to happen. And like, that was when I realized that like I had to stay in undergrad for another year and figure out, sort of similar to you, Tony, I'd finish one degree, but was there another degree I could do in a year based on the credits I'd already accumulated taking classes? Yeah, so that was the thing. I mean, that affected, I think, a huge number of academics at around our time, Tony, were hit by that same realization.
That happened to a few friends of mine.
Yeah.
Senior year of college, right? Like it was spring of senior year, right? We're all getting ready to graduate, and most of us had already had jobs lined up. But then there was one company in particular that got hit real hard, business jet company, and they ended up rescinding the offers of like 4 or 5 students who all were like had these job offers set, accepted, locked in, ready to move for months. And then like May of senior year, they're like, hey, we're rescinding all these offers. We have no money.
Yeah, it was a tough time.
They all went to the school, let them all into the master's program for aerospace engineering. Just like, yeah, you can just stay and get your master's.
You can just put off real life for another couple of years.
Just keep paying us. No.
Yeah, just keep paying us.
No, so one, I didn't really remember that or know that about you, Ryan, about the timing.
It's honestly not something I talk about a lot because it was an embarrassing and upsetting time for me. Like it was 100%. Right. It was also right around when this show was starting. Interestingly enough, like it was, I guess the show started in 2009. This all happened in 2008. So I'd kind of gotten through it by that point, but like I wasn't, it disrupted.
It was raw. It was fresh, probably.
It disrupted a lot of the plans that I had in a way that my life is probably in a very different place now because that happened. And I got the phone call from the professor saying that like I was in, except for because I mean, they'd flown me up there. I'd interviewed.
Right.
You know, been on campus. I'd stayed with the grad students overnight. I was ready to go join this grad program. And then I got the call that there just wasn't any money.
Sucks.
I walked to the Trader Joe's because I lived near Trader Joe's at that time, bought a 6-pack of beer, walked home, drank most of it, was like, I'm going to give myself a day to feel bad about everything that's happening right now. Gave myself that day. And then the next day I was like, all right, let's make a plan. And that was where I sort of came up with the idea of like, I'm going to take some more classes. I'm going to get another degree. I'm going to figure out grad school next year. This sucks, but I can solve this problem. Like you said, Tony, problem solving.
Good for you being an adult.
That might have been the first time.
That was the only time, to be clear.
Okay, all right. You know what?
Hey, never grow up.
Give me a month. I'll figure it out by then.
Yeah, you're going to have to.
Well, that's not something the listeners know, but sure, yeah. I probably will.
So I want to be a little more clear, though. I bring that up for context because it absolutely is true. And if you look at the numbers, you can Google this, right? How many people went to grad school? How many people were getting graduate degrees at that time? If you look at the NIH budget and stuff like that, you can watch as the numbers just tick up. Right?
I appreciate you bringing that up. I think it's an important point.
In all fairness, it was not really the driving factor for me. To your point, I had already been doing research. I enjoyed the lab. At the time, I was not burned out yet. I was like, oh, this is fun. I'd done a lot of computational science. I hadn't done a ton of wet lab work. I'd done some. I'd also cut my finger open by turning a razor blade upside down and pushing really hard on it by accident.
And I apologized for that, but
that was not you. But the student health department did ask me if I had brought my workers' comp form with me when I wanted to get it stitched. And I said, can you just stitch it first? Then we can talk about the workers' comp form that I had not brought with me. So all that said, with the aunt that's in science, I have a grandfather who was a pharmacist. I have a different aunt who was a research librarian. So I have some people who are academia adjacent or in academia in my life. So I had a lot of people pushing me, the history of being interested in dinosaurs and marine biology. And then eventually I even volunteered at a science center when I was in high school for a time. And I love that place. That place is still open. SciWorks in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. If you're ever there, check it out. That's my shameless plug.
Everybody gets one.
Right. So that was it. I'm out. That's my account. So I did all that, and then I applied to graduate schools. I had a ton of fun flying around. I interviewed at Notre Dame, which was weird, flying into that little tiny airport they've got there.
South Bend?
Yep,
Indiana?
South Bend. I think I connected in Cincinnati before that.
Sure.
I
Get
was
yourself some chili, like I was just talking about with Joe.
Yeah, definitely. But as mentioned earlier, too, my grandmother was from Hopkins. I had been in Baltimore a lot. And so when I applied and got into Hopkins, that was pretty much it. That was the dream school for me. I interviewed at UCLA, which was also, excellent campus. LA is super cool, downtown. But at the same time, they only offered me the same amount of money to live as the people in Baltimore were offering me. And I was like, I can get a heck of a lot further in Baltimore. And I have an affinity for that school to begin with. So
I again, another similarity. I got had 3 PhD offers, and the money, we're talking a game of inches. It was a couple $1,000s here, a couple $1,000s there, but over a year, that makes and based on where you're living, that makes a pretty big difference. And like I had to choose between living in a major American city for $1,000 less a year than Laramie, Wyoming.
Right. So never going to be a competition. Baltimore was super cheap as a grad student. I loved Baltimore. I loved everything about it.
Baltimore's great. Joe, thoughts on Baltimore?
Love Baltimore. As somebody who has lived in Maryland and in Los Angeles, your money's not going to go very far in Los Angeles.
But also just Baltimore's cool. Like, don't let the wire fool you. Baltimore is cool as hell.
Yeah. But
Watch out for Omar.
Lived there for 6 years, there are places you don't go, and you just learn that when you live in Baltimore. But you learn that in any big city, right? There's just places you don't go, and you don't go at night, or you don't go by yourself, and that's fine. All the places around campus and everything else, that's all fine. Downtown is super cool.
Beautiful campus too, like one of the classic American campuses.
Have you seen the movie The Social Network?
I actually haven't.
I have.
Jesse Eisenberg Facebook story, right?
Yep.
Filmed
Jesse Eisenberg playing Mark Zuckerberg,
right?
Who's playing a human and having the skin of a man who runs the social network. Yeah.
This isn't advertised on Facebook, is it? So, but no, filmed at Hopkins as a stand-in for Harvard. So that same, all the classic East Coast brick with some marble accents, right? Nice big quads. But that was fun. Saw that being filmed while I was there. A couple of different movies have been filmed in Baltimore.
Oh yeah, that makes sense because it would have been 2010 or I guess they might have been filming it before then, but I think it came out around then.
Yep. Same idea that Baltimore stands in for DC all the time as well.
That annoys me.
Does it though?
It always annoys me when they film places that they could just go. Like, why not just film in DC?
Because DC has expensive permitting.
Just pull the permit.
The Americans filmed in New York, so that was like so far removed from DC that I was like, I couldn't even be mad at it. I'm like, I don't know, maybe this part of New York looks like Falls Church. I don't spend a lot of time in Falls Church. Fine. But when shows like are explicitly set in DC and film in Baltimore, or more egregiously, Atlanta, looking at you, Marvel, I get annoyed because when they're like, this is the Senate
Georgia Film Company,
and like, and the location text that comes up on the bottom of the screen is like Senate hearing chamber. I'm like, oh yes, the one Senate hearing chamber that exists that we all know about that looks like the State House of Georgia when U.S. agent steps outside.
The one that kills me is the Metro.
Yeah,
because just get a stock shot of the DC Metro. Don't show me the Los Angeles Metro because you were too lazy to do that. I know.
Well, but most people don't even know that Los Angeles has a metro.
Yeah, I know.
There's like one line, right? Like Baltimore.
It doesn't go anywhere.
Well, because it was cut off by the car manufacturers, but that's a different segment of this program.
Right. We should do that later. So Baltimore graduate school, right? So I'll explain a little bit how a PhD worked, at least how it worked for me, because it was a little bit different even than how it worked for Jana Serbo, who is my wife and was also at Johns Hopkins. So I started out.
And is that where you met? Just to clarify?
Yep. Clarify. I met my wife at Johns Hopkins on the dodgeball team, intramural dodgeball. They needed more girls. That's why she joined. And she wanted to do something new. So a friend of mine was like, hey, come play dodgeball. You'll meet women. And I said, lies. I'll come play dodgeball because dodgeball sounds fun. I owed him many beers.
It sounds like she couldn't dodge you.
I think her first memory of me is me jumping off the walls like Spider-Man, because that's definitely what I did as soon as I walked in that room, did some wall runs.
But also, like, probably a fair introduction.
Yeah,
that's like, at least she knew what she was getting into.
Yeah, that's fair. I have a lot of energy. So PhD, generally speaking, right, in the biomedical sciences is 2-ish years of classes, followed by 3-ish years of no classes and research. And the question kind of becomes, and actually within the first 2 years, the first year for me was rotations. basically 3 or 4 3-month-ish rotations through different labs to try out different types of science and see which professor you are going to align best with to choose for your actual remainder of your 4 years or plus of PhD to do your dissertation, right? So did a couple of rotations my first year while I was taking classes, chose the lab of Dr. John Lorsch. So at the beginning of my second year, continued taking classes, began doing my research, so it was kind of 50-50. And then following my graduate board oral examinations my second year, which I passed barely, spent the remaining time just doing research in the lab of Dr. John Lorsch.
And is that test you just mentioned, is that the test that transitions you from being a student to a candidate?
Yes, that
Okay.
is that test.
So Joe, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but like when you start a PhD program, you're a PhD student. And we talked a little bit about this on the show, but we've never talked about it in detail that Tony is bringing. And then you take a test at some point, and different schools or departments give this test different names. Sometimes it's called the qual, sometimes it's called your comps, your qualifying exams, your compositional exams, whatever. Comprehensive exam, not compositional. And it's that moment when you transition from being a PhD student to a PhD candidate. And my understanding of that transitional point is basically the university is the department, and by proxy the university is therefore committing to you finishing the program.
Gotcha. I've
Yep.
heard all those terms before. I did not have the connection between any of them.
I'm glad we're clarifying.
I'm learning some stuff.
GBO, graduate board oral exam. That's what we called it anyway.
And it's called, and I don't even like, I had to take one test that wasn't a candidacy test and another test that was, and I honestly can't even remember which one was comps and which one was quals. But like once you transition to that point, theoretically, the university's got your back to finish out your program and get you that doctorate because they've assessed your plan, they've assessed your education up to that point in terms of the classes you've taken, and they've said, okay, Tony Munoz has what it takes to get a PhD from this university, so he is now a candidate because we are expecting him to finish within X amount of time.
Yep.
He's going to make it.
That's what they thought. They were right this time.
It still says expected on your CV.
It does still say expected. You should check that. I have a diploma somewhere. Actually, it's right next to me in bubble wrap. I've moved recently, and it's framed, thanks to my mother. But it needs to go up in the office at some point, which we've had recently painted. So the other thing that was interesting and a little bit different specifically about Johns Hopkins in my program is that my program has professors from both the main campus, often referred to as really the undergraduate campus, but it's the campus kind of in north of downtown in Baltimore. So that's the main Johns Hopkins University campus. They also have professors who work specifically for the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, which is kind of downtown into the east a bit. It's basically the hospital and the associated research buildings. So my first 2 years, my classes were largely at what is known as the undergraduate campus, the main campus. And then I happened to choose a professor for my dissertation who worked as a professor of the School of Medicine. So I moved campuses, as it were. Versus, I mentioned my wife, her program is based almost entirely out of the School of Medicine. They do have some classes at the other campus, but it's largely based downtown, more or less. So just an interesting little segue there about that. But yeah, so what do you want to know?
I want to know what, I guess we've talked for a while about how you got to this point, and so I think we're in the territory of we're going to have you back to get in depth on what you studied, but can you tell us a little bit about sort of, if you were to identify yourself as a scientist, what kind of scientist would you identify as, and what would you tell people you worked on?
Got it. Yeah, no, as discussed earlier, some people like to talk about themselves a lot, case in point. So I did a degree in molecular biophysics, which is a mouthful. And if you put bio in front of anything, it makes it sound smart. But strictly speaking, kind of with my definition of biochemistry earlier, molecular biophysics is, again, the study of biological processes at truly the smallest scale using the most intense methods and mathematics, right? So this is, if you've ever heard of an MRI machine, right? An MRI machine takes pictures of the body. Most of the way that works is by taking the water resonance signals inside your body. If you flip the signal on an MRI machine, it becomes a nuclear magnetic resonance imager, or an NMRI machine, and you can study the things that aren't water, which is basically what some people in my program and professors in my department were doing, and I did a little bit of that. But stuff like that, looking at very intense biochemical, biophysical processes using those high-end techniques. So that said, that's biophysics in a nutshell. I did really more basic biochemistry. I was doing kinetics equations. I was studying how tightly do things bind to each other, or how quickly do they dissociate from each other? Do they spread apart once you introduce some kind of actor that would break them apart, right?
Sounds like a metaphor for our friendship.
It's going quickly. But that's so despite the fact that I got a biophysics degree, the most of the work I did and the type of scientist I would end up describing myself as is still a biochemist, as my undergraduate degree states.
So I will commit right now to having you back on the show to talk more about the actual research you did. We spent a lot of time talking about your history, but I think actually it was really useful and informative because, like, Joe, who has advanced degrees, didn't know the process that you and I both went through. So, like, clearly this is information that isn't widely available to people. So I'm glad we talked about this, but we short shrifted you in talking about your actual research. So we will have you back to talk about that.
Congratulations, Tony. You've made it from podcast guest student to podcast guest candidate. Congratulations.
That was well played.
Thank you.
And with your ascension to candidacy, I think it's only fair that we offer you a drink, which we have, and we're going to talk about in our next segment, which is called What Are You Drinking? And that's coming up next. It would not be an episode of Science Sort of if we didn't talk about what we are drinking. And I think this is the first time that a specific drinking scenario has occurred where, Joe, you have provided the drink to Tony and I, but none of us are in the same place, and you are probably also not drinking that same thing. So how do we do this, Joe? Walk me through it.
It's a great question. I could start with my what you guys are drinking drink.
Okay.
You could parlay into.
So we'll go west to east.
Yeah. So I am drinking an alcoholic beverage, which is weird for me.
What?
But I am drinking a homemade mead that a friend of mine made, and he gave me a bottle.
A friend of yours made mead?
A friend of mine made mead.
You have a mead making friend?
I have a mead making friend.
Where'd they get the honey?
A mead making amigo.
We're going to need a lot of money, Michael. Bees aren't cheap.
I bet you it's that Manuka honey from New Zealand that's super crazy expensive.
No, it's definitely not.
And cures what ails you.
I also feel like if you're going to ferment it, you probably don't need to go for unless it's local, like you don't need to go for the highest end stuff.
I just feel like that's the only type of honey they sell.
Joe, have you had mead before? Or are you a mead
I haven't.
man?
This is my first mead.
What? He clearly hasn't been to the Renaissance Fair.
I don't drink much, so.
But a buddy of mine who is a well-known comic book writer insists that whenever anyone drinks mead, they have to give a Viking toast. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to insist. Here's what we'll do.
Toast.
You're drinking mead. Tell us how you feel about the mead, and then Tony and I will introduce our drinks that you also provided. But then at the end of the segment, you're going to have to give a Viking toast.
Okay. While you guys are introducing your drink, I will look up what that means. But it is
It literally just means like you just have to like give a braggadocio alcoholic drinking toast where you threaten to kill your enemies and get glory and Valhalla. Just channel your best Chris Hemsworth Thor and just give us a toast at the end of the segment. That's all I'm asking.
Cool.
How do you like mead?
It's good mead. It's good. It's a berry mead, and it has in addition to gobs and gobs of honey, it has it had a mash of blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, and blueberries.
Delicious.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
It's pretty good. It's very sweet, but it's good. Tastes like berries.
Do you have any idea what like the alcohol level is?
High.
Okay, great. Sounds like an
It
appropriate.
is a moonshine.
Yeah.
If you have any animal horns lying around that you could pour it into for your toast, I think that would help. But
I think it's required.
Cool.
Yeah, what are you drinking it out of? Because Tony and I have definitely been to a bar together where we drank out of horns.
Only
I am
one?
drinking it out of just a whiskey tumbler.
Actually, I think Tony and I have been to multiple different bars, not even the same bar twice, but multiple venues where we were drinking out of animal horns.
Yes.
Nice.
100% true.
3 cheers to Science Sort of and Eric P on the completion of your BSso. Well done, well done. Skål.
Skål!
Too much.
Too much.
Oh my god, that was perfect. That was so good. Joe, if you were acting about coughing at the end, you deserve an Oscar because that was amazing.
Thank you.
I don't think he was.
The world will never know. We'll never know.
I don't think he was either. But
He's struggling to talk. All right. So if we're going west to east, does that mean I have to introduce the beer that has
No,
been provided?
I'm west of you, Tony, so I'm next.
Are you?
I'm in West Virginia.
Oh, I forgot.
And remind me which
you're not at your
Virginia
abode.
you're in?
The best Virginia?
No, I'm pretty sure West rhymes
Least
with best.
Virginia?
So
West Virginia?
I think you're in East Virginia or Least Virginia, if we're going with the rhyming scheme that you yourself introduced, sir.
I did. So,
Anyway,
what are we drinking?
Tony and I both have my beer from Maryland.
Like due north.
The border state to both states that we are currently in. Joe is in town, which is awesome because I always love seeing Joe. And when Joe was like, hey, I'm going to be in town, I was like, oh, come over for dinner. And then I was like, Tony, come over for dinner because I wanted Joe and Tony to meet because I'd been texting them about, I guess, maybe in a future segment, we will tell the story of why I connected them on a text thread because I think it's an interesting.
I thought that might come up later.
Well, I actually think that story pairs well with, Tony, your idea of like, you get a PhD to be a problem solver. You know what I mean?
100%.
We'll talk about that later. Right now, Tony and I are enjoying a snake den. Okay, so Tony, have you been saying it Snakeden or Snakeden?
Snakeden.
Eden.
It could be Snakeden. It could be biblical. You don't know.
I don't. It does
Right.
have like a garden on the picture.
And a snake was in a serpent.
Yeah, but there's 3.
There were 3 people in that garden: Adam, Eve, and the snake.
What's
Yeah,
the
that's-
kerning situation on the can? Is there no kerning between the?
I would
the
say
E
there are
and
no
D?
I would say there are no kerning clues.
Hmm.
Unlike Blue's Clues, where we just got a letter, there's no kerning clues on this can.
Mhm.
Kerning can clues. So this is a Snakeden or Snakeden Saison from 7 Locks Brewing in Rockville, Maryland, the home region of our very own Joe Batwinis. This is a Belgian wheat ale with the classic Belgian wheat ale ingredients of coriander, lemon peel, pear, banana from those ester compounds. I'm sure Tony could tell us all about those with his biochemistry.
I'm not talking about double bonds.
And the 7 Locks it's a C&O canal thing, right, Joe?
Yeah.
You can tell us a little bit about that while I crack this can open.
The Chesapeake and Ohio Canal runs from Georgetown to Cumberland, Maryland, and as it goes along its merry way, there's a bunch of locks, and there's a bunch of locks in the Montgomery County, Maryland area, and there's an area called 7
I
Locks.
spent a lot of last year on lockdown.
Hey, there you go.
They just refilled it, actually. There's a $1-point-something million boat they just stuck in there.
I saw that. That was actually
Really?
kind of cool.
I can't believe it cost so much.
I can't believe they refilled it enough.
I can't believe it's not butter.
I saw a tweet recently that was like highlighting, Western Maryland past sort of where it kind of the choke point. And they're like, how come no one ever talks about what's going on in this part of Maryland? And then somebody from Maryland just tweeted back, like, you don't want to know.
Speaking of
Which is
not
weird.
Maryland, I was in Harper's Ferry on Monday.
Wow.
That is not Maryland. Good.
No, I did do the
story.
Maryland Heights loop, so I was kind of in and out of Maryland
You and I were in the same state.
for a hot minute. Great crab cake, by the way, at the Rabbit Hole there in downtown Harper's
All
Ferry.
right. What is with all these free ads that are getting thrown out on my show this episode?
Trying to get that ad revenue, man. Remember, like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. Oh,
This
wait,
is
wrong
not a
platform.
YouTube video. This is not a YouTube video.
You know what you
Can't
got
talk
when you
about-
signed me up.
Oh my god.
I appreciate your enthusiasm.
I'm so frustrated. I'm so frustrated, in fact, that I'm going to bring back a previous segment that has been retired for who knows how long. We don't even know how long the segment's been retired, Joe.
It's been a minute. It's been since before I was on the show.
It's on the website.
I've never done one.
Do know. I actually thought that you might not have done one, which I'm really excited to announce the one-time return of Trailer Trash Talk.
Hey y'all, it's Trailer Trash Talk.
All right. So what's this trailer that we're trash talking?
So it is the return, one-time, potentially triumphant, but definitely existent return of Trailer Trash Talk, which is the segment of the show where we talk about a movie trailer, usually sort of a sci-fi or geek culture trailer. And what better trailer to herald the return of this segment than Dune? Because
the spice must flow.
The spice must flow. Oh, Joe, you nailed that. That was beautiful. Dune is being made into a film again for the third time, I think.
They've definitely done it before.
But have they done it twice before is the question I'm wondering. Either way, it's Denis Villeneuve who made Arrival and made other good sci-fi stuff. He made the Blade Runner 2049, which feels like it's happening tomorrow. And he's making the new Dune. And it's got, to say that the cast is stacked feels like an understatement.
Very stacked.
Name a person you've seen act in the last 5 years, they're probably in Dune. Dune, for folks who might not know, is a novel from the 1950s by Frank L. Herbert. 1965 by Frank Herbert. It is the first in a series, but I believe Frank Herbert died relatively early in the series, and most of the books were written by his son. That is my understanding. I've read the first novel, which this movie is the first half of that first novel. What are y'all's connection with Dune? Do you have any Dune feelings? Dune whatevers?
So I've seen Dune twice. The original movie. I've not seen the remake. I'll be honest, I didn't love it. And then I watched it a long time ago, and I was like, this movie's freaking weird. And
is this the one with Sting?
Yeah. So, but then a couple years ago, or like maybe last year, I gave it another chance. And I was like, no, this is a weird movie. It's still weird. But the trailer for the new one looks much more interesting.
That doesn't sound like trash talk.
It's not always trash.
It just has to be a trailer.
That's fair.
Tony, what's your history with the Dune franchise?
So there was a movie that had giant earthworms in it.
Yeah, Tremors.
Yep.
Kevin Bacon.
Tremors.
But also Dune.
When people talk about Dune, all I can think about is Tremors, and having rewatched all of those movies on whatever daytime television show ran them when I was in high school over and over. And so I have very little actual memory of watching Dune, if I even ever did watch it. And I did not read the book. I was not an avid reader growing up of sci-fi, with the exception of a few things like Jurassic Park, again, dinosaurs. But so yeah, I'm kind of a newbie in the Dune world.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that about Tremors. I also, before I rewatched Dune recently, I was mixing up my memories of Tremors and Dune from my early watches of both back in the day. They both have big worms. It's basically the same movie, right?
I mean,
so
does that mean Gen Zers are going to mix up Mandalorian?
Oh,
I don't think
that's not a worm. That's a crate dragon. It's
Gen Zer
totally
is
different.
watching The Mandalorian because it's not one of the prequels, which they would claim are the best Star Wars movies. So let's just. But I think we can all agree that we hate sand. It's cold and it's coarse and it gets everywhere. So it sounds like none of you have read the Dune book.
No, I haven't. I have it sitting on my nightstand. I have not yet read it. My friend who lent it to me insists that I must read it and that it is excellent, but I have not yet.
Jana refuses to watch any more trailers until she reads it.
Interesting. She's the kind of person that I would believe that she would read the book out of spite, just to make sure she was ready for the movie,
100%.
Are either of you fans of Denis Villeneuve?
I liked Blade Runner 2049.
I mean, Arrival was great.
So you both liked the same movies that he's done.
Some of them, at least.
What about Sicario, Tony?
Well, that was good too.
Know that I've seen that one.
You haven't seen Sicario? Sicario is really good.
Yeah, I heard the second one not so much.
Google them, right?
But he didn't do that one.
Right. Arrival was excellent. Sicario was excellent. Blade Runner 2049 was excellent.
Prisoners is great, but it is rough. It is a rough watch. It's a depressing movie, and it is relentless in its sort of dark themes and
So it's
characters.
a dark version of Taken, based on this.
I've never seen Taken, but
synopsis on IMDb.
I mean, it's about it's about a kidnapping. It's about a community falling apart because nobody trusts anybody else, and it's
when
it's
Keller
rough.
Dover's daughter and her friend go missing, he takes matters into his own hands.
Yeah,
Yep, that's
He has a
Taken.
select set of skills.
Yeah,
he doesn't though. He just all he has is the skill of like capturing people and punching them. It's bad.
But see, I didn't actually like Blade Runner that much. It was okay in my
Did you
personal
not like?
opinion.
Wait, you don't like the original Blade Runner, or you didn't like Blade Runner 2049?
I don't like 2049 specifically over the original. And I wasn't
original is still
particularly fond of the original.
The original is still a better movie, I think. The original is very muddled because like it has so many different cuts. Like did you watch the director's cut or did you watch the complete director's cut? And it's like, well, I don't know. Just tell me what. Like I would like to watch.
I watched the Snyder cut
movie, right? Well, who's got that kind of time? And that's
grad students.
That's sort of why it's interesting to me that he picked Dune as a next project, because Dune suffers from the same sort of muddled interpretive, like people have seen the David Lynch version, but then there's people who've read the book, and it's like it's not clear which version. There is no like definitive version of Dune. You know what I mean? And
it's still moldable,
much like a Dune itself. The sands of time shift in the winds. That should have been my wrap up for this segment. Why am I doing it now? We haven't even talked about the trailer. What do you guys think of this trailer?
So I've watched the trailer. And I think this is the second trailer now that's come out.
Yeah, this is what they're calling the main trailer, which I'm going to go ahead and say seems like a stupid distinction, but it is a distinction.
So, I mean, the cinematography, at least in the trailer, looks awesome. Gorgeous. I love a movie that is aesthetically pleasing. I'm really like watching clips of it right now. And there's a shot at 1 minute and 7 seconds in where I believe there's a spacecraft or something landing, and the feet of said spacecraft just immediately remind me of Star Wars.
Like a drop ship?
No, actually, I think an AT-AT.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I see it.
But I am skeptical because, at least in the first trailer, the storyline, I'm just still not entirely sure what's going on.
Well, Dune is notorious for being like a long and very like good world building novel that basically doesn't have a plot. And I read it in college. We talk about college a lot in the first segment. And I could kind of tell you what the plot is, but like a lot of the time the characters are high because for folks who don't know, the Dune novel came out in 1965, written by Frank Herbert. Huge influence on George Lucas. So a lot of stuff in the early ideas behind Star Wars are, I know that there's like Kurosawa films and there's The Hero with 1,000 Faces. Like I know there's a lot of influences that are peppering throughout Star Wars, but Dune is one of them. It is not a coincidence that this movie mostly takes place on the desert planet of Arrakis, and Luke Skywalker is from the desert planet of Tatooine. Like those are absolutely linked. C-3PO at one point even mentions spice, because he mentions we'll be sent to the spice mines.
Spice runners.
No, the spice mines.
The spice mines. Yeah.
So he's referring to the same drug that all these characters are taking. That's why their eyes are bright blue. It's because they're high. And as far as I remember, the story is basically a noble family gets tasked by a corrupt emperor to quell an insurgent nativist rebellion on the desert planet of Arrakis, which is a planet that has no resources of any importance, including like water. They've got no water, but they have spice. They have this drug that everybody wants, And the Fremen, who are the native people of this planet, they are super water stressed. They wear these things called still suits, which are like the weird suits you see everybody wearing when they're on the planet, and it retains all of their bodily water, like everything they breathe out their nose, everything they exhale out of their mouth, everything, they cover their eyes. So like 90+% of the water that comes off their body on a given day, they recycle in these suits and then drink again. There's a great scene in the book where like there's a contract that's being negotiated and one of the Fremen spits on the table and everyone thinks that this is this huge sign of disrespect. And what is later made apparent is that, should I say spoiler warning? Spoiler warnings for Dune, the book, and potentially the film. I don't know. Haven't seen the film. Seen the trailer. The guy spits on the table and everybody's like, oh my God, he spit on the table. But then it's made apparent that like spitting on the table is a huge sign of respect because he's giving up some of his water for this contract. And that's like his signature is water. So really cool. The cast for this movie is like just all-star after all-star after all-star. A lot of the book is knife fighting because like the technology in this world has progressed to the point where all the blasters and lasers and whatever guns they would use, everybody who has enough money wears these force field projectors that stop any projectile moving at a sufficient speed, but a knife, when it's stabbed by a person, is a thin enough object and a slow enough moving object that it can penetrate suits, the force field. So that's why everyone's knife fighting in the trailer.
I feel like they would change their technology at that point.
Well, I mean, if you had a thing that could stop any bullet at any time randomly without you even thinking about it, and all you had to worry about was the occasional knife fight, which technology would you choose to wear? The knife?
Yeah.
Well, if everyone got rid of the guns.
That hasn't happened yet. So
gotcha.
So Paul Atreides' family is tasked by the Emperor to quell the natives of the planet Arrakis so they can control the spice because, as Joe likes to say,
the spice must flow.
But Paul Atreides, the son of the guy who is Oscar Isaac's character, is tasked with taking over this planet and making sure that the natives are properly subdued. His son ends up becoming familiar with the natives, and I won't spoil the ending of the book, but like it's sort of it's kind of like Dances with Wolves, Last Samurai vibes. Like he also joined in their cause to a degree that might not be fully explored in this first film, because what I understand is this first film is only going to be about half the first book.
Looks like Oscar Isaac put on quite the beard for this.
Man, how good is he? How much do you
want?
The
book is like 900 pages long. So,
how much do you want Oscar Isaac to be like your mildly disapproving but still supportive dad?
100%. I mean, between him and Jason Momoa, was that Zendaya in this as well?
Yeah, she's Michi.
That means nothing to someone who hasn't read the book.
No. Zendaya's Michi is a different meme I'm referring to.
Nope.
It's fine. Just search Zendaya's Michi. You'll see that I'm an idiot, and the meme will be preserved. No, she's great. So yeah, she plays one of the Fremen who helps convince Paul that their cause is just and that their exploitation as a people is not just.
Is that Bautista in here too?
Dave Bautista is also in it. It is a stacked cast.
Big cast.
Rebecca Hall.
I always get hesitant though when you have a really big cast like that, right? They get a lot of star power and then something else falls through the cracks pretty majorly.
But I mean, Denis Villeneuve, I don't even know that I'm saying his name right. He's a pretty particular filmmaker. Like I don't know.
Yeah, he did good with Hawkeye and Arrival.
Oh yeah. He made the guy who plays Hawkeye seem intelligent. Yeah, that's it's not an easy task.
Wow,
harsh.
That was mean. Sorry. Listen, Clint Barton, not the smartest, not the strongest Avenger. He's got the best aim of the Avengers, if maybe better than Cap's, but it's fine.
I feel like Natasha's aim would be better.
I'll say this. I did buy 10,000 shares on the Hollywood Stock Exchange.
Yes, that was going to be my next question. So, Joe, we used to do this segment, and we used to participate in this thing called the Hollywood Stock Exchange. Tony, I'll explain it to you, I guess. We would choose to long or short this movie based on the trailer, much to the frustration of Patrick, our co-host, who cared about winning at this stock exchange enough that if a trailer was bad but we thought the movie would be good, he was like, well, we shouldn't short this movie.
Yeah, still go long.
But I'd be like, nope, trailer was bad, we got to short it. That's the premise of the thing.
Yep.
And this is not real money. So
gotcha.
we eventually boiled it down to a thumbs up, thumbs down Roman emperor, but also not Roman emperors, because that never happened. That's a Hollywood thing, which also makes it even more appropriate for this segment. Thumbs up, thumbs downing of the trailer in terms of sort of, did this trailer make you want to see the movie or make you not want to see the movie? So the official, I will say for clarification, because there have been multiple trailers, this is the Dune official main trailer that came out on Thursday, July 22nd, for the Dune movie coming out October 22nd, 2021. Tony, you are a guest. We will ask you to go first. Thumbs up, thumbs down on Dune the movie based on the Dune official main trailer.
Yeah, based on the trailer, this trailer alone, I think thumbs up from me. The other thing that's always worked for me with trailers, and this is really subjective, but if I get chills watching a trailer, which ends up coming down to the score more than anything,
Good score.
I need to go see this in the big screen, and that's the kind of trailer this was for me.
It was a good score, I think. We didn't even talk about the worms.
Nope. Well, I was going to mention the other thing I just noticed in the trailer too is some of the ships look kind of like
insects.
The Jawa's ships.
Oh, the sandcrawlers.
Sandcrawlers, yeah, but they fly. So not sandcrawlers.
Beat you to it, Joe.
Sandflyer.
You did.
Ever so slightly.
The other ones are dragonflies. You're right.
It looked like the one criticism I actually have of this trailer is it looks like some of the effects are not finished.
I mean, it's a trailer.
I know. That's the thing. I love trailers as an art form. The reason we started doing this segment of the show is because, like, I, at that time in my life, 10 years ago, was like, I think trailers are their own kind of like art form of like, how do you take an entire movie and condense it down into this little mini story that tells you something about the movie without telling you everything about the movie. And I thought that was a really impressive feat to do.
Well, I think we've gotten away from that more recently too. A lot of trailers just give everything away, and I hate that.
I don't know, man. I honestly think we might be looking at a camel hump distribution, because you look at older trailers like pre-1990, and if you go even further back, if you watch
bimodal for those mathematicians out there.
Thank you. If you look at the trailer for like Casablanca is like, it's the story of a guy who runs a bar and the Nazis are there. Like, they just tell you everything that's going to happen. So like, I think we had a moment where the trailers were a little bit more Inception. Wow, what is this movie? And now we're kind of maybe coming out of that in an interesting way. But
the other thing with trailers too, and going back to the score for a second, I pre-Wikipedia went down quite a rabbit hole many years ago, because I saw a trailer for something and I knew the score, right? It had to be from something else. And there's apparently this whole trend to do that, where you take some famous movie and part of its score and you resample that, right? For your movie to get people hooked, because they knew that they had a positive association with it.
There's a great video about how the MCU has been doing that for its entire lifespan.
But it was like something really crappy, like the movie Timeline or something. But it used like a piece of the score from Jason Bourne, and then you learn
Michael Crichton's Timeline.
No, that's not it. Then it was the one with Paul Walker.
That was Michael Crichton's. That was the adaptation of Michael Crichton's novel Timeline.
Was that a crappy movie?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so yeah, crappy movie.
I'm just all I was doing was expressing that I knew what you were talking about.
Gotcha. I just got confused because I was like, no, that means if Ryan saw it, it must have been better.
No, I watched so many crappy movies. Don't listen. Jesse, my good buddy Jesse, you will remember from the Tenet episode of Science Sort of, gives me a lot of guff for being willing to watch every middle budget sci-fi film on Netflix. Just like, yep, watch another one, Jesse. Like, the budget was clearly a couple million, and it looks okay, but here's the one cool concept they explored. And he's like, okay, well, I'm not going to watch it, thanks. But Dune, definitely not low budget. The budget is clearly insane.
Clearly astronomical, yeah.
Well, it's set in space, Joe.
$1 billion.
Except my pun.
It has to be astronomical by default, because they spent the money on stars. Both in the Hollywood sense and in the astronomical sense. Okay, sorry, Tony, I cut you off. You were saying?
I don't remember what I was saying. Oh, something about scores and the fact that it was like all like, was it Howard Shore? No, what's the other guy's name? They were all the same guy, right? And he was making all these different like disparate movies, but they kept going back to him for those types of things. And I'm a big movie soundtrack kind of a guy. Actually, most of the time I'm doing work and I can listen to music. I don't listen to any kind of pop music or anything. I go back to movie soundtracks because or video game soundtracks.
Yeah, actually, you gave me some of the best advice. I had a fellowship where I was required to like sit at a desk and work for like the classic 9 to 5, which is something I have learned I really struggle with. I do my best. Like if you're paying me a paycheck, I will do it. And I will try my best. But I was having a hard time, and you and I were hanging out, and I think that was when we went down to the fish market.
Could have been.
Is it the Rhode Island Fish Market? Is that what it's called?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. The one in the wharf.
Yeah.
They've got a rum factory there.
Yeah. So we were hanging out, just two guys hanging out at the fish market. It's fine. Don't ask questions. And and you
Get your crabs.
You told me about listening to video game soundtracks, and your point that you made, it was brilliant. I loved the point you made, was that like their
not
soundtracks,
an original point. Definitely read it somewhere.
I don't care. You're getting credit in this show. It was their soundtracks designed to keep you engaged, but just enough that you don't get so excited that you like get up and walk away from the computer.
That makes sense.
And so I spent a lot of that fellowship listening to Skyrim soundtracks, like Skyrim Tavern Music, 13 hours, youtube.com.
It works. It makes sense. Like you said,
it was great. I loved it.
Because how often did you have to play a game in the same level or the same storyline over and over and over? And it didn't care. At no point were you like, oh, this music's annoying.
But
or maybe you did.
What isn't annoying, or maybe what is annoying, are cars. You guys want to do some car talk?
Let's do some car talk.
Wait,
car talk radio. That's a thing.
Did I give my... Wait. You both were thumbs up.
I actually didn't even give my thumbs up.
We need to do our thumbs up.
Blew right past Joe.
Yeah, yep. We super did. Sorry, Rob. leave it all in. Leave our fumbling, and we haven't done this segment in years, so just it's fine. We don't really know what we're doing.
3-hour episode.
And Joe, in 3, 2, your rating.
I give it a thumbs up.
Let's go for Joe. Can we go for Joe? Mic's on for Joe. Hot mics for Joe. Your mic is hot.
Can you hear me?
I can hear him.
Go Joe.
I give it a thumbs up.
And we're
good
go for Tony.
I give it a thumbs up.
And go for Ryan.
You're Ryan.
Ryan, go whenever you're ready.
Excellent radio.
No, super thumbs up. I realized I was going to be a hard thumbs up for this movie when I saw Oscar Isaac in his armor. I don't know how they fabricated that armor, but it just like it pushed back against every CGI stormtrooper I've been forced to put up with in the last 20 years of Star Wars.
Pew pew.
And I was like, oh, that armor is so chunky and it looks so uncomfortable. And it looks like he's actually like weighed down by it in a way that just like so many modern movies, like there's a whole thing. Okay, so you guys saw Endgame, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cap fights himself.
Yes.
In Endgame. And when they filmed that scene, neither version of Chris Evans is wearing a helmet, and they realized it was too confusing. And so the helmet on original Avengers Chris Evans is all CGI.
I was just watching the making of
Go for Joe?
Yeah. Sky Captain of the World of Tomorrow. Falcon and the Winter Soldier assembled on Disney Plus, and they were talking about the CGI they have to do because like nothing looks right ever.
Yeah.
On the suits. So like suits, they want the suits to always be like basically body hugging.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the cowls never do. Like whenever you turn your head, like the fabric folds and bends away from your skin, and so they always just CGI it back to be right up against the face.
So like the fact that, even something like Cap's helmet can be CGI'd in convincingly enough when it's a fight scene and they're all moving around and jumping and whatever.
Cut.
Fine. But like to see Oscar Isaac in armor that looks practical and looks practical in that it was actually built, not practical in that it looks useful. And part of the fact that it doesn't look super useful is what makes it look more practical in the real world. It was fabricated and built sense. I love stuff like that. And I also I love that like we have no sense of the plot, especially for people who haven't read the book. And it's literally just about like, okay, so Timothée Chalamet is into Zendaya and a bunch of other older dudes and his mom are just being like, yeah, you got to figure out how to deal with that. And here's a knife.
Yeah.
Here's a movie about that. And I'm like, well, all right, I'm in. Let's check it out.
I'm always a fan of practical effects.
Yeah. Music sounds great. Rebecca Hall's in it. We didn't talk about that nearly enough. No, not Rebecca Hall. Rebecca Ferguson is in it. But she's also great. Both of those Rebeccas that I mentioned are great.
Good recovery.
It's true though. Like I remember when I saw Rebecca Hall in Iron Man 3 and they were acting like she was a plain looking person. And I'm like, I'm sorry, this is a very attractive person and you're acting like she's not attractive and I don't understand. And that seems to be Rebecca Hall's entire career. And I'm very flummoxed by it. Rebecca Ferguson, also great, very believable as the intense, awesome mom of Timothy Chalamet / Paul Atreides. So I would say I'm 2 thumbs up, fully on board for Dune, even though it's a book that I've read and only middlingly liked, and I've never watched any other adaptation. I think it's a good thing that we're making a movie of it because Denis Villeneuve is a great director, and I'm excited to see what he does with the property.
We shall see.
All right, Patrick, go ahead and log into the Hollywood Stock Exchange that we haven't used in years and give us a long bet on Dune, 2021's Dune. Well, Batman's here, so let's talk about the Batmobile in our next segment that we're going to call Car Talk. Bye! And hello. Here's the segment. It's our second segment. It's called Car Talk because I was having a problem with my car and I was like, well, who are the guys I know who know about cars? That's probably Tony, it's probably Joe. And so I started a text thread and now we're all friends, maybe? I don't know. I'm friends with both of you. I hope you guys are friends with each other. And we talk about cars. So how do you guys feel about...
We both enthusiastically encouraged you to put a solar panel on a car.
We did.
And
that
I
happened.
did. And the mechanic
And it
was
worked.
impressed. I wired that thing to the battery through the driver's side. No, I actually went through the rubber grommet in the driver's side seat well. But we can talk about that later. You know, Joe, obviously everybody knows you're a car guy. Tony, can you tell us a little bit about your car history? You being a car dude, a car guy, are you driving in the Top Gear?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier I was born in Germany, so I've been back frequently, and the town my grandmother is from is near to the larger city of Stuttgart, which is where Porsche and Mercedes are built. So I grew up seeing a lot of sports cars. I didn't own any. My family didn't really own any, but watching Formula One, my father was a big Formula One fan. We watched the 24 Hours of Le Mans. My grandfather lived in Indianapolis and went to the Indy 500. So I have a lot of race car TV in my history. My big thing was because I was kind of around-ish nice cars, I would go take pictures of them. So I was kind of a car spotter for a while and had a fairly well followed Instagram account for a little bit where I had pictures of really nice cars. And now I live in the DC area and I love going over to Georgetown and seeing supercars driving around. And I still take pictures of them. I don't post them anymore, but they make me happy. So I watch Formula One. I stopped watching Formula One for a time and I've watched it again now. The Drive to Survive has come out. So sorry about that for those folks who think that that's not really what the real world of Formula One is about. But I think it was cool. And
it was cool. Don't apologize.
So that's my thing. I've been to the Frankfurt Auto Show twice, which was a ton of fun. Speaking of car spotting, been to a couple of races. I was a volunteer for the Baltimore Grand Prix when that used to run before it got shut down because they kept running over manhole covers and going airborne. And the light rail tracks, it really wasn't a great street circuit in that sense. It was an excellent layout. I actually did it in my car at 3 a.m. one time and set a pretty decent lap time. My car is a Mazda 3 2.0 manual transmission, so nothing fancy, but it is a manual and it is a zoom car. And I think Batman 2 now has some Mazda experience as well.
Yeah, I got a Miata. And then before that, I had a Miata. And before that, I had a Miata. And then before that, I had a Miata.
So are you a dentist?
A dentist? I guess.
He
I don't know.
doesn't
Is
shoot
that a thing?
lions, Tony.
Oh,
Is that a dentist thing? Sorry,
yeah,
dentist.
it was dentists and I don't know, or it was dentists Porsche Boxsters. I don't remember. It was some two-seater sports car.
Is the Miata.
Hairdressers.
Miata is hairdressers, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
But and yeah, I've been to a lot of racetracks in the States. I go to VIR a couple times a year just to check out what's going on. I don't go on track yet, but maybe soon. We'll see. I'm getting interested again.
It's a good way to turn money into brake dust.
Ha! Car parts are expensive.
Yeah.
But also,
So what are we going to car talk?
A thing I deal with a lot in my life is I'm a pretty good computer guy. And a lot of times I get frustrated because like people will ask me computer questions, and in asking the question I realize like, oh, you're like, the way you and I interact with this technology is so far removed. Like we're so far apart that I don't know how to answer your basic question because like I just don't.
You don't know where the start button is.
Exactly. And I feel like we're sort of reaching that point with cars becoming these highly, highly technical machines to the point where like, it's becoming harder and harder to repair your own vehicle, but also we're reaching a transition point where, I'm talking to my folks about like, hey, have you guys considered getting a electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid? And it's coming from a place of true curiosity of just like, well, we don't know where we would plug it in. And I'm talking about like, well, theoretically, at some point in the history of gasoline automobiles, you could go out for a drive and not be 100% sure you were going to hit a gas station before the car ran out of gas. And I just kind of wanted to like touch base with two car guys who are both also forward-thinking technological individuals about where are we in this moment? What's happening with cars? What's happening with electric vehicles? What's happening with hybrids? And I also have noticed that like a lot of people they're not even super aware of like the different terms that are flying around. So I was kind of just hoping the two of you could maybe start the discussion by laying out what is the current landscape of the types of cars that are available from your diesels to your turbo diesels to your gas to your plug-in hybrids to your battery electrics, just and lay out that framework, and then just talk about sort of where we're at, where we go from here, and what you guys are excited about in the space.
Sure.
We're going to get technical.
Yeah.
A little.
So,
and I think he called us intellectuals, by the way, which
that was
appreciated.
probably a mistake.
We can breeze past that.
Cut that, Rob.
Cut that.
Yeah, so technically speaking, so you can buy a bunch of different types of cars these days, right? So there's your standard internal combustion engine gasoline car.
ICE.
You can
See,
buy...
this is good. This is okay. So like
Hello.
You threw that acronym out there, but like I would not have clocked that acronym if you hadn't juxtaposed it with him saying that. So like this is the level of discussion I want to have, because like I pay a little bit of attention, but I would like to pay more attention, and I would like to draft off of the two of yours expertise. So internal combustion engine, ICE. Thank you. Continue.
Yeah, so internal combustion engine is an engine that explodes things inside of it to make
sounds awesome. I'll buy one of
chemical
those.
Turn chemical energy into kinetic energy, right? So you explode some stuff, it pushes a piston, it turns a crankshaft, you get rotational motion out of that. So you can do that with gasoline, which is what most people do. You can do that with diesel fuel, which is like gasoline, only a little less refined, something chemistry.
It's less flammable.
Yeah, it is
Just doesn't
ignited
blow up quite as good.
Well, it's ignited via pressure, which is interesting. So whereas a gasoline engine, there's a spark plug, which you compress the fuel air mixture, a spark goes off in the chamber, ignites the mixture, causes an explosion. In a diesel engine, you just compress the fuel air mixture so much that just sheer pressure builds up heat, which causes spontaneous combustion.
Is that why there's lag when you have a diesel? Or
I
guess
so.
Turbo lag
That's
is something.
Yeah, turbos is what's usually causing lag, but not really so much anymore.
Okay.
So diesels are pretty popular over in Europe, although less and less so. They're starting to get popular here, and then Volkswagen had the whole Dieselgate.
They lied.
Scandal where they lied. They cheated at emissions tests. Their cars were smart enough to know when they were being emissions tested.
I went to a race at VIR once where they had the VW turbo diesels going, and it was hilarious. Just watching them run around with their little engine notes.
They were caught by a research group in West Virginia.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
At
I mean,
WV?
there's still fallout from that. There's people
yeah.
still paying.
Well, I just like that it was VW, but you flipped those letters and it was WV that caught them.
Nice.
Volkswagen.
The people's car. The people's wagon.
Yep.
Yeah, the people's car.
The wagon of the folks.
Yep.
And then you've got the hybrids. So you've got some basic parallel hybrids, or a standard hybrid, which is like your Prius, which is where you have
that's called a parallel hybrid.
There's parallel and series hybrid.
Okay, all right.
That's getting real technical. But basically hybrid meaning you've got a gasoline, typically powertrain, and then you also have the battery electric powertrain. So a battery driving an electric motor, but then you also have the gasoline engine, which can drive the wheels.
Yeah, powertrain is just the literally whatever it is that is turning the wheels.
Yeah. Everything that's rotating between engine and wheels or motor and wheels, all of that is the powertrain.
Okay.
And then you have the plug-in hybrid, which is things like the Chevrolet Volt, no longer in production, but the upcoming Jeep Wrangler plug-in hybrid, which is, I know,
the Hummer's getting one too.
Ryan's dream car.
To say that I'm drooling over it would be an understatement. I've never been a Jeep guy, but the idea of just off-roading on batteries warms the cockles of my cold dead heart.
There you go.
That torque band while you're crawling.
Yeah, I mean, electric's good for torque crawling.
Don't know what that means, but you said it in a way that sounded positive, so I will say, yeah, definitely, I'm into it.
So a plug-in hybrid has a bigger battery where you can plug the car into the wall or into a charger, and then you can charge up the big battery, and then you can get some amount of range out of the vehicle on pure electric. So no gas engine usage at all. You can just drive around on pure electric, which is pretty nice. But then you also have the gas engine there if you want to go farther. So like the Chevrolet Volt is good for 50 miles of electric range, and then you have a gas engine that can take you even farther. And then as long as you can put gas in it, you can keep going. And then you've got the pure battery electric vehicle, which is just all battery, big battery, electric motor, drives the wheels. Very simple. More and more of those are coming out every day, it seems. And then you've got the hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle, which is where you have a pressurized tank of hydrogen. You take that hydrogen, you pump it through a fuel cell membrane, something magic happens. You crack electrons off of the hydrogen by combining the hydrogen with oxygen, making water. An electron pops out of that, something chemistry. And then that goes into an electric motor and drives the wheels. And there's a couple fuel cell electric vehicles on the road today, or that are available. So that's kind of...
That's the gamut of types of vehicles, more or less available.
And I remember seeing a lot in the 90s about a solar electric vehicle crossing the outback in Australia.
I mean, they have things like DARPA.
You sent me a link to a solar urban vehicle, so...
You had a solar urban vehicle that you created.
I did?
I mean, partially.
Oh, yeah, I guess I did. So, yeah, I was having an issue with I have a Toyota 4Runner, an older Toyota 4Runner, and it was not starting, and the battery clearly was having issues. And I won't tell the entire story here, but I did at one point rig up a solar panel to the battery. And I'll tell you, it worked when I parked in direct sunlight. It didn't work.
Ran when parked.
Well, the problem was I lived in a building that was, the way the parking situation was set up, there was literally no way for me to park where the angle of my vehicle was aligned with the sun, because I could only put the solar panel on the front windshield, and because the cord literally just wasn't long enough to reach the battery if it was on any other window other than either the driver's side window or the front windshield. And so there were only so many angles and places I could park without getting a ticket to get enough sunlight based on where the buildings were and the angle of the sunlight. And so it was a good system when I could get sunlight directly on the car, but without direct sunlight, the solar panel did not produce enough current to keep the battery charged to start the car. So, but it was I don't know, I had fun futzing with it. I had fun figuring it out. So how did you did the two of you both end up as car guys? Like, I guess Tony gave his history a little bit with the F1 and the Indianapolis 500, but like, Joe, have you ever talked on the show about how you were first introduced as a car guy?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's basically I got into the Baja SAE program in college and just kind of turned into a car guy through just direct exposure through building a race car in college, basically. Even though it was a little off-road car,
It's a pretty cool way to do it.
It is. I kind of focused on street cars, personal life, I guess. Hence the 4 Miatas.
And to me, cars and computers, and to a lesser extent, cell phones are like these fascinating, or smartphones, I guess, are these fascinating objects where like most Americans, I can't speak as well to the outside of America experience, but like most Americans use a car, use a computer every day, but also most Americans have no idea how they actually work.
Oh, yeah.
And I increasingly in my life find that frustrating because, as Tony talked about, like, Tony, you set this up perfectly in talking about a PhD being a degree in problem solving as
You're
much
welcome.
as it's a degree in anything. And so, like, to me, it's insane that we live in a country where, like, people rely on their cars and they rely on their computers and nobody seems to know how to use them or how they actually work.
Well, I mean, in fairness, they've gotten extremely complicated over the last 120 years, right?
Well, even in the last 20, right? Like growing up with the internet, like I used to understand everything about how computers work, and I can't even be bothered now to figure out how the newest social media platform works, right?
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, and cars too, even in the last 20 years have gotten way more complicated.
I thought we were going to get into right to repair and all the
that's where I was going, yeah.
Let's talk about it.
So you used to be able to do like anything on a car because they were very simple, right? Like everything was mechanical and you could work on it yourself pretty easily with some basic tools. But now basically everything requires plug it into the onboard computer, and the car manufacturers would very much prefer you not be able to do that.
Because they make their money from the service department.
Exactly. And then interestingly, that's spread to like agricultural equipment now, and farmers have had a long history of working on their own tractors and stuff. And there was just a recent lawsuit that I think came out in favor of the farmers, basically, and right to repair agricultural equipment and being able to work on your own tractors and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see if that bleeds over into the automotive world. I
think I just saw an article today that was referencing some regulatory body that might actually get the backbone to stick up for right to repair for people.
And right to repair literally means like, when you buy a piece of hardware, such as a tractor, such as a car, such as a cell phone, do you, as the owner of that product, have the right to repair it when it breaks? Or is the manufacturer of that product, your John Deere, your Ford, your Apple, are they basically allowed to say, you're not allowed to repair that, you just have to buy a new tractor, buy a new Ford Explorer, buy a new iPhone?
Or exclusively bring it to us to fix it, right?
Exactly.
Which isn't dissimilar from where we are with some digital content nowadays, where you don't truly own your music, your movies, right? You can buy a movie and you technically can watch it anytime you want, but
there is no better example of that than Amazon removing 1984 from people's Kindles when they had a rights issue with it. And I'm just
right,
like,
so you paid for it, you had access to it.
Yeah,
you can still go to a library, but
wait, hey Siri, define Orwellian.
Yeah.
Orwellian, removing 1984 off of people's devices remotely because they didn't have the rights to read it.
Yeah. But like the most direct example is in recent history is cell phone batteries, right? Like it used to be that cell phones always had a removable battery. You pop the case off, you pop the battery out, you could go buy a new battery, extend the life of your phone for another 2 years, right? But now you can't open a phone anymore. They're adhesive shut, and you have to have like special tools to get them open.
Break the glass.
Oh, yeah, can't I? You just hear this crash in the background.
Oh, there goes $800.
Yeah.
But there was a really cool modular phone somebody proposed not that long ago where each individual component, the camera, the screen, the battery, right, all those things could be like subbed out for the newer model.
It was basically a motherboard and a case, right?
Something like that. But
was it? honestly, it was one of the two of you that sent me that. I'm not exactly sure which, but like, yeah, it was a case that you could just swap. You could hot swap a fresh camera. It looked like a cell phone, except it was, it had seams along the axes of where all the major components were, so you could swap them out when better versions or just a refresh was needed.
Well, what's interesting is that the phones look like that inside. Like all the different components are often just like modular, but they're inside the case and stuck in there.
And cars are going to be that way too. I mean, if cars move electric, right? That's the whole point. Going back to the service department thing and why so many people were mad at Tesla for so long, because it's an electric car, they don't have oil changes, they don't have a lot of the components and things that like wear out and require service. So they, notwithstanding their own quality control issues that they had for a while, right? They just still have panel gaps are a thing. For those who don't know, panel gaps are when, for instance, like your hood and your side fender on the front, your quarter panel don't really line up well, and so you can literally stick a finger in between the two. That's a quality control issue oftentimes that people report on and be like, oh, look at this is shoddy workmanship. Kind of going back to cars made in, the country in England back in 1960s and 70s during labor.
Hey, the parts falling off this car are of the finest British quality. I saw that on a Morgan once.
I mean, electrical issues on Jaguars. I mean, every car manufacturer has had issues, but at the end of the day, right, a Tesla doesn't require as much service just because of the nature of its electric-only powertrain. And we can get into charging supercharger networks and universal connectors for different charging ports. And I actually think I just saw this week that Tesla is going to open up their supercharger network to other vehicles.
I did see that.
I did see that.
Duh.
So there are a couple of persistent myths. I'll call them myths. You guys can tell me if they are myths about electrical cars. I often hear and am told when talking about electric cars and even plug-in hybrids that like the batteries that are made to be used in cars like Teslas use more energy to create the batteries than the cars save in not burning fossil fuels. But I assume, what do you guys think about that?
Lies.
So that is a persistent myth.
I called it a myth when I introduced it.
You did. That does come up a lot. And there have been a number of studies over the years looking into that. They always find it to be false. One came out very recently, in fact. As if I knew you were going to ask about it, I have it pulled up on my computer right now.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
More T-ball.
So there is a study from the International Council on Clean Transportation called A Global Comparison of the Life Cycle Greenhouse Gas Emissions of Combustion Engine and Electric Passenger Cars.
And my understanding of there is the key word is life cycle, right?
Yeah, life cycle. So from the day you start making the bits and pieces of the car all the way until the car is retired.
Because it takes X amount of energy to build a gasoline engine, an ICE internal combustion engine car versus an electric car. But like the internal combustion engine car, presumably when the car is finished, the gas tank is empty. So you're not like filling it with fossil fuels in the building process, but you're filling it with fossil fuels continuously throughout its life cycle. Whereas a battery electric vehicle, you might need a certain degree of fossil fuels to get the batteries produced. But then once those batteries are made, when you refill the batteries, you're not necessarily refilling them using fossil fuels. Right?
Yeah, a lot of that argument comes from the rare earth metals that they need, right? Specifically the lithium. And actually, I think California is looking at adding a new lithium mine at the Salton Sea.
Yeah, lithium is a huge issue in America just because America doesn't have naturally occurring lithium deposits to take advantage of. And there's a lot of talk across various industries about figuring out ways we can reclaim lithium literally from like the brines that are injected for fracking, right? Like, can't say I'm the hugest fan of fracking as a general concept, but like they have these brines that they inject into the rocks to get them to frack. Those brines have X amount of lithium, and it's theoretically possible that once those brines are used up in their fracking potential, that we could extract the lithium and conserve that for a battery technology purpose. We also, like in America, I'm not trying to blow the lid off things here, but like we don't recycle our batteries nearly as well as we could. Like we could be harvesting a lot of lithium if we just recycle the batteries that we stop using because they've sort of ended their life cycle, if I understand that technology correctly.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really recycle anything well enough here, but batteries are certainly a good thing to recycle because they're very recyclable.
All I remember is that I was in a Senate hearing when I was working as a science policy fellow. And I won't say which senator, but I will say it was a Democratic senator who does not support ending the filibuster. Was asking questions to a person who specializes in battery recycling. And there was a little bit of confusion. And so like, I just feel like if a senator has that confusion, then maybe other people have that confusion too. So like, it's worth talking about. And I'm literally not trying to throw shade. I'm not naming the senator who doesn't support any of the filibuster who said this, but like there was confusion about like what happens to the batteries in Tesla when they reach the end of their life cycle. And like, there was confusion about whether or not is the Tesla dead when those batteries can't be recharged that well anymore. My understanding is that like theoretically there's not really any Teslas that are at that stage at this point just because they're so new, but like you could change the batteries, right?
They talked about hot swapping them for a while as a supercharging method.
That's a great point, Tony. Can you explain what you mean by that?
I mean, so early on in Tesla's development, and I think this has gone by the wayside now, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but they were talking about, well, because of people's range anxiety, right? The idea that, because it's an electric vehicle and I don't know where the supercharger is,
Is range anxiety a term?
Range anxiety is a term.
That's really cool. I hadn't heard that before. That makes a lot of sense.
And it's used as an argument for a lot of people not buying an electric vehicle, right?
Sure.
So one of the concepts that they had was if you have the battery and it's one component and it's easy to unplug, like we talked about with the cell phones a minute ago, right? You could drive up to a supercharger, if you will, and they would just drop the battery out and plug a new one in and you'd be ready to go, just like you're an RC car, right? Buy a couple extra batteries or be able to swap them out for freezies, basically. That hasn't materialized, but that technology is available, and then they would go back and do something with that battery to make it, recharge it slower or whatever they needed to do to get it usable for someone else.
Yeah. So Tesla ultimately supplanted battery swapping with the supercharger network. They got the supercharger network fast enough that they decided that it wasn't worth the effort to go to battery swapping. If you've got Netflix on a 17-inch screen in the front of your Model 3, you can plug in for 25 minutes and get an 80% charge.
But that's a great point, Joe. I do want to speak to that before you interject your butt, because like I hung out with Jacob a couple of years ago when he came up to Charleston with Sarah in their Tesla, and like they had to plan their route. They had to and this was a couple of years ago, and it's gotten better since, but like they had to plan their route to make sure that they were hitting fast charging stations frequently enough that they could charge up. It took, they would have to stay at those charging stations for like an hour, but like the Tesla has this big screen that they literally just were like, we picked a show and we would just pull up Netflix and watch an episode while it was charging or take a nap or do whatever. Like it takes currently, and this technology might get better. It currently takes 3 to 4 times as long to charge your electric vehicle as it would take to fill up your car with gas. But they've introduced some really cool features to make that hour-long process not that bad, to the point where like the graphics processor in a Tesla can run video games from a couple of years ago, like Witcher 3, and you can it's crazy the degree to which the technology has made it possible for you to entertain yourself for that amount of time.
And it's not an hour anymore. At this point, we're talking 20, 30 minutes for most of the newer vehicles coming on the market for a majority charge, right? Maybe not a full charge, but there's also that like interplay between you don't actually want to go to 100% charge. The higher your battery charge is, the longer it's going to take to get that extra percentage based just on the math of how those types of things work, right? Same thing with cell phones. So
yeah, you usually stop it around, slow it way down around 80% just to keep the battery from exploding.
Right. So if you could charge more frequently, right? And that's why most people, right, don't actually drive that far for that to matter, right? Only if you're doing a road trip. My day-to-day driving, I would never hit past a range of almost any electric vehicle on the market today. But I do drive to North Carolina a couple times a year, and that is a 350-mile drive. And so I don't have an electric vehicle yet for those reasons, because I was a little hesitant around that idea of having to find something. And I just saw an article that came out about maybe we need to rethink the whole process of when and where we do fill up, quote unquote, right? So today, most gas stations are along interstate highways, and they have a McDonald's and a Burger King and those types of things around them, like crappy food. You don't really want to get off the highway that long and eat and stay there. You just want to get off and go. If, as we're starting to develop out this supercharger network and the entire charging network for the country a little bit more, what if we intentionally put the charging network a little further off, knowing that we have to take slightly longer to recharge an electric car, a battery electric car, and get people to explore something that's only probably 5 miles off the interstate? Right?
I love that.
For those 20 minutes, and revitalize those towns in some way, right? Get in some more people, because let's be serious, as of now, not going to be the future case, but still today, electric vehicle owners are by and large slightly above the median income. So they have a little bit of extra cash to spare.
You're talking about all the towns that, like, these towns that may have died because the interstate didn't go through them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I think about my use case scenario. Is that an engineering term? I use that term all the time. I have no idea.
Absolutely.
Use case scenario. Yeah, use case is good.
Use case is absolutely a term.
All right, cool. My use case for interstates and filling stations, whether I don't have an electric vehicle, but if they were, electrical filling stations, for me, it's like, is there a place that I can go to the bathroom? Is there a place my dog can go to the bathroom? Is there a place I can get food that I don't hate myself for having gotten? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a company in the UK called GridServe that's been starting these electric vehicle charging pavilions along the motorways over there. And it's a big line of chargers of various rates depending on, what your car can accept. And then there's a very nice building right next. It's basically a rest stop, because like an interstate rest stop, because they know that you're going to be there for a little bit longer than normal, right?
Yeah.
But they have like a nice coffee shop and restaurant, and assorted stores in the building that you can go and hang out, and like nice seating to like spend a little bit more time than you would normally. And that's the kind of thing I expect we'll start to see happening here too.
You're right. I mean, as much as I'd like that ideal that I discussed and I had read about, I think we'll probably go the route of, people want to just fill up, and we'll get to a point where the technology is fast enough that people will deal with it, and it'll still be along the interstate. We won't actually revitalize small town America. But
yeah, I expect charging stations will just get faster and faster.
Yeah. I mean, that's the nature of the technology at this point.
I took the train from DC to West Virginia this last trip, where I'm now currently in West Virginia. I literally went through an abandoned coal town that still has an active Amtrak stop. You can.
I was surprised to learn that the Harper's Ferry parking lot is in an Amtrak station.
Is it Amtrak or Mark?
It's an Amtrak station.
Is it Amtrak?
Yeah. So that's still serviced, and okay, I guess some people commute from there.
It'd be good. I mean, always. I think folks like us would agree that like a robust rail network would be preferable, but like maybe this is sort of the question to end this discussion on, at least sort of in this moment, and in sort of thinking about what comes next. Like, it doesn't seem like America is going to ever transition away from cars. And so if you, maybe you agree or disagree with that sentiment or statement, but like B, what's both of yours perception of what comes next if we assume, hoping on hope, that what comes next isn't the end of the planet?
So I'll say that America is very much a car dependent country, right? Our entire country was basically rebuilt around the automobile.
I mean,
when it became popular,
rebuild is almost like, it's almost a considerate way of saying it. It's almost like we destroyed other modes of transportation
in favor of.
Yeah, we did 100%. But and we tore down downtowns to build parking lots for cars. We put in minimum parking requirements for buildings, and we framed zoning around the automobile. We designed neighborhoods around, like the entire existence of the suburb is based on the automobile's existence.
You could even point to the National Park Service, a thing that I love, as a symptom of car culture, because the idea was like, well, surely people will be able to drive out to these parks that are in remote areas.
Right. Yeah.
Public transportation took a hit. There's a decent argument to be made that like the homelessness crisis that we are facing is because of the, in part of these minimum parking requirements, that like we can't build buildings without building parking spaces. So like people who don't necessarily need or want cars can't afford housing. Like there's a lot of issues. So
yeah, no, for sure. The dependence on automobile causes tons of problems. And so, but we are car dependent, and the likelihood of that changing anytime soon is slim to none. So converting the existing automobile fleet, passenger car fleet in the United States over to battery electric is basically a must do in order to hit any kind of climate targets. And that's kind of what this study I referenced earlier was about, right? It was looking at what do you have to do to get greenhouse gas emissions down to have any hope of hitting any kind of like Paris Climate Accord targets. And it was looking at that myth that, battery electric vehicles are way worse if you charge them on coal, and they're just not, right? So like even the takeaway from this study was that the greenhouse gas emissions, life cycle emissions of a battery electric vehicle in the United States is nearly 70% less than an equivalent internal combustion car. And that holds true in Europe as well. China's a bit worse because their electricity production, but it's still better. India's even a bit worse still because their electricity production, but still better. So generally speaking, I think the only option is to get, especially for the United States where we're so car dependent, is to get our car fleet over to electric.
Important point there, that in the study and in all these studies, right, an electric vehicle, oftentimes its cleanliness, if you will, is directly correlated to where the electricity that's powering it comes from, right? So in a country that has more coal or more renewables, it'll go one way or the other on how efficient it is over its life cycle, right?
Yeah, we've talked about that before on the show, of like if you live in a state that is still mostly coal-fired power plants and you're plugging your electric vehicle into the wall, like it's still fossil fuels that are powering the electric vehicle, but again, it's this life cycle question, right?
Right.
Yeah, and crucially, it is still better to charge a battery electric vehicle on coal than it is to drive a gas car.
Right.
Right. I mean, that just makes sense when you think about like scale, right?
Yeah, and as the grid improves and gets cleaner, that battery electric car will get cleaner by doing nothing in and of itself, right?
Which it is, right? Everybody in the world is slowly changing their electricity generation to be more renewable one way or another, right?
Yep.
And I just spent the last couple of days here in West Virginia with 2.5 and 10 millimeter particulate counts in the range of dangerous for individuals who have lung health and other health conditions, should not be outside exercising much, right?
Thanks to the wildfires.
That might not have made much sense, but what I'm saying is the air quality here where I am in southern West Virginia was bad enough that the recommendation was, if you have a respiratory condition, it was not advised for you to be outside doing anything strenuous for the last couple of days. The wildfires that created that condition were in Canada. Like, we've reached a point where I don't know how else to say it. Like, we're not, bleep this, Rob, but we're not around anymore. Like, we've got to do something, because the air quality in West Virginia is bad because of things that are happening in Canada. Like, we've got to, it's time to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks,
And the fires that are happening in Canada are bad because climate change has made droughts bad, which dries out vegetation and causes bad storms, and
which is at least
wildfires, and it's just
partially
bad.
due to oil consumption, petroleum products. And Ryan, you brought up the great point at the very beginning of this, which is where are we right now? Or the question maybe you brought up, where are we now in car culture? And you're seeing with the prevalence of the different electric vehicles coming to market and the acceptance of Tesla and the major automakers coming out with competitor products, the luxury brands, the non-luxury brands, right? Porsche has their electric Taycan. Audi just came out with a e-tron sports car. They already had a number of plug-in electric hybrid vehicles as well. If you look at, countries like Norway, where the vast majority of new cars are electric vehicles, right? We're getting to that point where it's going to be commonplace, regardless of the supercharger networks, regardless of the range anxiety, regardless of the power source that's feeding that electric vehicle. Everyone's going to have an electric car. States are mandating it. States being both the United States, states like California, states like being foreign states like the country of Germany, right? That's going to be the case before 2050 in the majority of the places that we live, work, and visit. So
the point I made to I was talking to a person who had like this electric recharge hesitancy, or I can't remember the term you used, but like they were worried that if they bought an electric car, they wouldn't be able to recharge it frequently enough. And the point I made to them was, at some point in the history of the car, as we know it today, there weren't enough gas stations, right?
Yep.
People, there were times where people got in a car and weren't sure that by the time the gas tank was getting low, there was going to be a gas station in range. That's never happened to me in my life. The only times I've ever come close to running out of gas were all just my fault for being a dummy. Like, I've never been in a situation where there wasn't the infrastructure in place to charge that car. Now, tell you what, guys, I got an electric car, I got a solar panel. I don't have an electric car. If I got an electric car, I got a solar panel, I'm never running out of juice. I might be moving slow, but I'm never running out of juice.
Some of those Teslas got solar roofs, right, Joe?
Not the Teslas, but there's a car coming out called the Aptera, which is pretty dope.
That's not how it's pronounced. Joe.
Oh, the Fisker Karma had one.
Oh,
Yeah,
Joe, why are you saying it like that?
Aptera?
That's not how it's pronounced.
Well, how do you say it? I'm pretty sure that's how they say it. How do you say it?
He says Snakeden.
It's the Atera. It's the P is silent.
It's pterodactyl.
I don't think they say it like that.
It's the P is silent. It means wing.
Yeah, I mean, I get it.
I'm so mad.
I get that's where it's, I get that's the derivation.
Show over.
And on that bombshell.
That bombshell.
Well, that bombshell. It's time to end. Okay, so last question.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, make your point, Joe.
The Atera, as Ryan would call it.
If you're gonna say it that way, you cannot make your point.
You're killing me. The Aptera / Atera, depending on how pedantic you feel like being
Joe,
at any given point.
I love you. I want to give you a big hug right now.
Thanks, buddy. You can get it with a bunch of solar panels on it.
How many wings can you get it with? None, because it's
no wings. You cannot get it with wings.
We are not going to have flying cars, though.
We're not allowed to have it with wings.
Well, that's the Ateran, or whatever you want to call it. Literally means without wings is the car name.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fancy looking.
Yeah,
it's nice. It's not a bad looking car if you hate yourself.
There's a Dutch car that used to look like that a little bit. But anyway, one last question
from me to y'all is, without naming names, let's just say we had a car show on the BBC where we had a lot of money. Maybe we're the most popular television program on the planet, and there's 3 of us, and we get along, but we're like, are we mates? Who knows? And we go on big trips together. You know, what role would you put each of us in, and where would we go on our big trip? What would be the challenge from the producers?
I think I would probably be the long-haired, boring guy who knows a lot.
What, the Cocker Spaniel? What dog do they always compare him to?
I don't know.
He'd be wearing a pink shirt.
Salmon.
I would definitely be the young guy who like crashes all the time and is excited about things and doesn't really know what he's talking about.
Yep. Wow, I think that puts me as the honorary Dr. Boorish fool of a disaster.
Yeah, try not to punch our producer in the face.
I can't promise anything.
Power!
Yes, of course.
And then you get a farm.
Relax. Okay, so what's our trip? What's our let's say we're gonna go on a tour, and it was like a large size tour, but like in Spanish, like a grande tour.
Grande tour.
Come on, that wasn't that bad, Tony, was it?
No, it was good. I was wondering when Amazon was going to pick this up.
Where are we going? What's our like challenge that we've got to pull off as 3? Are we mates? Are we not mates? Who knows? Relax.
I mean, I'm going to go back to the solar panel thing and say we've got to drive across the outback.
Oh, I love that.
Which some of us have already tried. I used tried intentionally.
Yeah, I failed. There was a small creek that caused a lot of problems.
Crick.
Crick in West Virginia slang. But I had some good mates and some bogans and some right.
Because I don't know that they've done that. These fictional characters
they've
we're
done
speaking
Australia, but they've only done like a ranch and herded cows and sports cars. But they've not done a solar powered. Tony. Oh, that's such a good idea. So do we have to like? Here's what I think would happen if we were going to actually plot it in the way that they tend to plot their specials. We'd have to buy cars that we'd try to get across the outback with, and we'd realize there was like a fundamental failing of those vehicles, and then we'd have to like install solar panels halfway
through. Only bought them for 500 quid.
Do they call them quid in Australia?
No.
They call them dollars there.
No, well...
We would have bought them in England and shipped them.
Oh.
No, that's a terrible...
That's not what they do. They always buy them local.
Do they?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes. The Colombia one, they didn't. The Bolivia one, they did. So it varies.
It varies.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm going to do...
That's a great idea. Tony,
what would your car
great
be?
Idea. Well, if I'm playing the role of the orangutan, I guess I would have to get a ute, right? Would the hamster get a ute?
The hamster would probably get a ute. That's a good point, though.
Yeah,
you would
100%.
Get the largest off-road vehicle.
No, I'd get like a sports car that takes so much power I could drive 5 miles and then the batteries would crap out and I have to park for another 40 minutes.
Oh, I forgot that I said there had to be solar.
Yeah, I would probably end up in a first generation Toyota Prius.
That's exactly.
Yep, 100%.
Oh, Joe's really good at this game, Tony.
I told you, I'm an ideas man. I don't execute.
Well, it's because you've been drinking too much Brummy's Ruin.
I want that mead now.
Which is gin.
Good mead. It's good mead.
Well, this was fantastic. I'm so glad you were able to join us, Tony.
Happy to be here.
Well, this was a fantastic conversation, a long and rambling conversation, and I don't know if it's ironic or not, but like there's so much more we could talk about Tony with. We're gonna keep talking to Tony a little bit, but like I hope, Tony, you will come back at some point where we can actually really dig into your science and even more car talk and maybe go on some sort of tour that is larger than the average tour. But until we get the chance to do that, we have to end the show on our final segment, as we always do, with PaleoPOW. Segment of the show where we deal with feedback from the listeners. Joe,
hello.
A listener tweeted at us with some nonsense that you were spouting. Can you read the tweet and then defend yourself, please, sir?
Yeah. So a apparently British listener of ours, Mark, tweeted at us. He said, on Science Sort of, I think it was Joe who described the United Kingdom as the Texas of Europe, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since. It's such a perfect description. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate you identifying my perfection. I will be honest.
I don't know that that's defending. I think it's just...
I don't know that's... I mean, he said it was a perfect description. He didn't say that Joe Batwinnis was himself perfect.
I think it's implied. So...
Did you say that? I don't remember.
I don't remember saying that, but I was racking my brain trying to figure out what the hell I must have been talking about, or as Mark might say, what was I on about?
Relax.
I think the answer is Brexit.
Has to be.
Because Texas, back in the early days of
Texas Brexited?
No, well, they didn't Brexit. They wrote it into their constitution that they could Brexit if they wanted to.
So you're saying maybe mess with Texas a little bit?
Yeah. But then Texas wanted that sweet, sweet interstate highway system money, And so they said, okay, we won't tax it in exchange for that money.
Which ironically had a lot to do with how the rest of the United States has decided to tax it, even when you live in Texas.
Yeah.
It's worked well for their power grid, if that's any.
Oh man, this is going to be. I truly believe in this episode I've not said anything nakedly political. This is not going to be one of those episodes where we get comments of like the politics are too much in this show. So sorry to all those
you
people.
You didn't name the senator who's against the filibuster who also lives on a houseboat called Almost Heaven.
I didn't. I couldn't.
You didn't name that senator.
No, I didn't say which houseboat they lived on.
I didn't remember a houseboat at all.
Yeah, Joe introduced that fact about that person that is a true fact about that senator. And there's only 2 senators that are Democrats that don't support abolishing the filibuster, and one of them does live on a houseboat with that name.
But we haven't named that senator.
No, I don't know who you're talking about, Joe. So
could be anybody.
I hear you all angrily typing your reviews. I'm sorry that politics is a thing that exists.
Just like climate change. It's a thing that exists.
Oh, Joe. You're killing me, Joe.
And the coronavirus.
I'm sorry. Send your hate mail to Jacob at Science Sort of.
Next, Tony would tell me to get vaccinated.
Yep.
Yeah.
But you didn't care that I wasn't vaccinated when I cooked you dinner.
Yep.
What?
No, I'm kidding. I was vaccinated. The dinner wasn't.
For smallpox.
Actually, I'm not vaccinated against smallpox, that's a really good point, Tony. Like, you guys know me. Am I enough of a hipster? Can I source a smallpox vaccine to get vaccinated against smallpox?
I bet you could.
Probably.
Like, is that the hipster thing to do though? Like, if I'm a vaccine
hipster? No, that's genetic engineering.
The hipster thing is to go find a cow with cowpox, scrape some of that pus off, and stab it into your arm.
Yeah.
Old school.
That guy died.
What if I just work really hard with my hands such that I have open sores on my hands and then go milk a bunch of cows?
Yeah, that'll work too.
I think that's even more.
That's how people got monkeypox in Texas.
Well, I don't want that. But I think I'll just steer clear of Taxit because they're the UK of America.
Yeah.
Don't know if it works the other way.
What I do know, Tony, is we got to fly into not necessarily the tone zone, but the Patron zone. So if you liked this episode, which big question mark there for a lot of our listeners, I imagine, I thought it was a great episode. So if you didn't like this episode, I think maybe you need to get vaccinated. I don't know what that means. Get vaccinated against having taste for podcasts. Our show is supported by Patreon. People can support the show by going to patreon.com/sciencesortof. You can sign up at a variety of levels. The levels get you various rewards like seeing the show notes and episode topics before we post the episode. But if you go at the Avogadro's Army level or higher, Tony, do you want to guess what that level is? Avogadro's Army, that's your clue. Avogadro.
8.02 times 10 to the 24th?
Nope, that's a different 6.23.
That's it.
Yep.
3.14?
It's fine. You only have like 4 chemistry degrees.
It's been a while. I mentioned it at the top of the show.
Good callback. So if you sign up for the Avogadro's Army level or higher, we grant those people what we call, Tony, a BSso, a Bachelor of Science Sort of. It is an absolutely fake degree being run out of our for-profit university degree mill that is this podcast. And so this episode, we owe Eric P a fake thesis title for his BSso, his Bachelor of Science Sort of.
I want one.
Tony, the way this works is we tend to come up with a degree that's based on the topics that we talked about in this episode. So what do we want to...
Electric vehicles and biophysics.
Electric vehicles and biophysics, but it also, it should probably have a colon, and it should probably have a pun. That's sort of how we tend to do it.
And an acronym, if possible.
An acronym is next level. So...
thought someone had one teed off earlier.
We did mention T-ball a couple of times. That's a good pull. T-ball. Is there something we can do with cars and biophysics and T-ball?
I mean, batteries have chemistry, right?
Yep.
So biochemical batteries.
Can we do swinging for the fences?
Swinging for the electric fences.
Ooh. Tony, that's so good. Was that not Joe? That was really good.
Good. It's good. It's good.
Swinging for the electric fences. I like that a lot. And then colon, right?
Yep.
What was the big, long, scary word you used? Biomolecular chemistry physics?
Molecular
Something.
biophysics?
Molecular biophysics. That's the word. So give me something from molecular biophysics that somehow generates electricity.
I mean, going back to nuclear magnetic resonance imaging, NMRI.
Hang on.
I'm hanging by a chad here.
What's a fancy word for a tank of water?
Reservoir?
Yo.
All right, drum roll, please. Do we have it?
Joe, do we have it? You're the arbiter.
The arbiter.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Read it aloud, Joe, for the people, and especially for Eric P, for whom this is their BSso thesis title, for which they are being granted their Bachelor of Science, sort of.
Yeah, so congratulations to Eric P on your thesis, Swinging for the Electric Fences, an electric vehicle charging solution utilizing molecular biophysical properties of Electrophorus fish in an in situ aquatic reservoir. Well done, Eric. Well done. We're all very proud of you here at Science Sort of University.
Yay.
Power! All right. Well, Eric, you did such a great job on that thesis that I think we can safely end the show there. Tony, you have an eclectic sort of social media presence. I don't want to speak for you and what you would like to put out there in the world. I know you've got various things that for a while were sort of public facing and maybe aren't as much anymore. But like, if people are interested more in you and what you're about, where can they go? What can they do? How can they find you at the Maryland Renaissance Fair, the largest Renaissance fair in these United States? What are their options?
Yeah, good question, Ryan. To your point, I am not quite as prevalent online as I used to be. If you want to follow my car stuff, do follow me at AutobahnTM on Instagram. That is the normal spelling of Autobahn, like the German highway, with the letters TM at the end for my name. If you want to...
Also, it's trademarked.
Not trademarked.
No, it is trademarked. Tony, what are you doing?
Hey, if you want to follow me and the science a little bit more, I think you're just going to have to connect with me on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn at Antonio Munoz.
Include a message that you heard him on the show. Otherwise, it might just seem random and weird.
Full disclosure, I do not use LinkedIn a ton. So at any rate, but I will be on the lookout just in case.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Very cool. Well, Joe, how are you doing? You got anything going on in your world?
I don't. It's the end of the world as we know it. But, maybe the end's in sight now.
Well, Joe, I heard a billionaire was going to take you into space.
Oh, man.
I heard he was too busy that day.
Hey, none of them blew up yet, so...
I heard none of them
congrats.
really went to space.
Yeah.
One of them went to space, yeah.
I heard a Russian street
Gagarin
dog did better than any of these jokers and died for the privilege.
Shout out.
Man, I would have adopted the hell out of Laika if I'd been given the chance. She seemed like a
Pour
great
one out for him.
dog. Well, I think we can all agree that Laika, the Russian street dog that was launched into space, is better than any billionaire. Okay, no politics in the show. Goodbye. I'm sorry that politics exists. I'm sorry if that upsets you. If you would like to let us know your own politics, and actually, I will say this sincerely, if you are frustrated by your perception of our politics bleeding into the show, I totally understand that. I am willing to read anything you send our way. You can send that our way by emailing PaleoPOWs@ScienceSortOf.com, going to the contact page on our website at ScienceSortOf.com. We have show notes for this episode where you can find links to a lot of the stuff we talked about. This was a little bit more of a freewheeling discussion than a lot of our other episodes tend to be, so the links might be a little depauperate, but that's okay because it's still going to be a great time. Feel free to get in touch. If you do get in touch, you might find yourself as the subject of a future PaleoPOW. Please give us a rating or review wherever you get your podcast, unless you don't like us, in which case reconsider, and get in touch with me and let me talk you down or talk you up into giving us the review that I think we all know that we deserve. And
5 stars.
The rating that you would give Joe's Miata.
Yeah, I think
That's a 5 stars for 2 seats is
Yep.
what I always say.
5-star crash
Joe's-
test rating.
Thanks for joining us, Tony. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, Tony.
Pleasure to be here. Enjoyed it.
I-
Happy to be
I
back
hope you
anytime.
had fun. We had talked about recording in person. That did not work out because we didn't do it.
Yeah, we played VR instead.
Yeah. We watched my wife play VR to the best of her ability, and it was great.
It's a good time. A good time was had by almost everyone.
Except Clementine. No,
She got lots of treats.
She liked you a lot, Joe. I know you had issues with Clementine. I apologize if I made you uncomfortable with your proximity to my dog, but I think she has fond feelings towards you, so hopefully everything is good in that sense.
That's good. That's mostly on me. Early scarring. It's hard to break.
You did your best. And we're all friends. We all had a great time talking. I really enjoyed this episode. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. Whatever feedback you have, we're on the socials, we're on the Twitter, we're on the Facebook, we're on the Instagram. Email is PaleoPOWs@ScienceSorter.com. I'm Ryan. That's Joe. That's Tony. Thank you for listening. Be sure to come back next episode where you're sure to get a whole lot more science.
Sort of.
Audio production for Science Sort Of is done by Rob Heath at Rob Heath Studios. Thanks, Rob.
Visit ScienceSortOf.com for show notes, links to all the stories we talked about, and ways to interact with the host, guests, and other listeners. Science Sort Of is brought to you by the Brachiolobe Media Network of podcasts. That's all for this week. See you next time on Science Sort Of.
Well, it's probably a German word.
Yeah, it's always a German word. Compound noun has to be.
Yeah.
Falken Connecten Steigel.
It sounded more Scandinavian.
Well, you know who I'm married to. I'm trying my best not to let IKEA product names infect my brain. I've started referring to things by their actual IKEA name, and it drives me. I hate myself.
We were talking about the Jimenez.
We
were.
No, but I mean, Julie and I finally put up our Kungsford.
Oh.
I hate it so much.